Good evening, beautiful people of planet Earth and all other interdimensional entities of love, light, truth, harmonic resonance, peace, sweetness, kindness, protection of our Earth, the good guys, the good folks, the good people, however you want to describe that. They're out there, people. The truth is out there. We've had a lovely day. I sawed out 2 more little butterflies because I ended up melting the other ones I worked on for 2 days. So I've just finished actually. It's taken me a few hours to do. Getting a little bit faster, maybe. It's a lot of work. And I'm nervous that when I try and solder them down that they'll melt again and we'll be back to square one, because each time I have to remelt the gold, I lose some of the gold, and didn't have a lot of gold to begin with. First world problems. But anyway, I'm okay. I'm working on that project to finish that lovely sterling silver cuff with the Persian turquoise stone, and I can't set the stone till I solder down the little gold embellishments because the heat will wreck the stone. And then I think I need to buy some kind of thermoplastic to hold it in the vise so I can set it and hold it at the same time, so I don't make a mess of setting the stone. So that will be another added expense I'll have to spend on, but I'm really enjoying what I'm doing at the moment. Feeling quite accomplished, even though I failed a lot with the little gold things. I'm just intrepidly going back in until it's done. And then I'm going to wear it, and I'm going to have a bit of a swagger, and someone might say, "Oh, that's lovely. Did you make that?" And I'll be like, "Yes." And I'll feel like, a somebody instead of the universal schmuck and the shit-kicked one is what usually happens, but shh. I'm manifesting a better life for myself, one piece of jewellery at a time. At least, if nothing else, it's giving me new skills and teaching me a lot about my resilience and my determination to complete a project or complete a mission, and I'm actually quite proud of myself, if I say so myself. I had my debrief with my wonderful psychiatrist today. He's a wonderful human being, really is. So, I had Hungry Jacks for lunch because I was ravenous, even though I've gained 3 kilos. So I shouldn't be having any takeaway food at all, but I was hungry and I felt like a bit of a hot meal, and chips are my favourite things. I could be a supermodel if it wasn't for my love of fried food and chips and But anyway, I didn't eat a lot yesterday, and then as a consequence I had trouble sleeping again. Because my Viking berserker body, it doesn't function unless it's very well fed indeed. So anyway, it was good that I had the Hungry Jacks because I was nice and settled and calm when I saw my psychiatrist, and yeah, it was a good debrief. And then my usual practice is when I finish with my session with him, I go to Garden City and have an early dinner at the Mr. Curry place. But I didn't because I've already had, takeaway beforehand. And so I thought, what shall I do for dinner tonight? Anyway, I'm not having dinner tonight. I've had quite enough calories, by the way. But what did I do? Naughty mama tea. I ate an entire packet of chocolate sultanas I bought in Aldi. So that was naughty, given that I've decided that I've got to drop those 3 kilos and get back to my usual weight of around 90 kilos, which is way too much. I'm only supposed to be 65 or 70 kilos, but I sit on around 90 usually. So there you go, people. We're just going to have to be a bit more disciplined, cut out the chocolate and the chips, and dance even more. Dear goddess, my GP used to want me to eat more vegetables as well. Okay, well that's a bridge too far, isn't it? Snickers. But I did buy vegetables in Aldi. I bought sweet corn and celery. What else did I buy? Sweet corn, celery, a little miniature watermelon. I actually bought that for the birds, not for me. I know, I hear ya. It's not good. But anyway, I'll probably have one of the sweet corns for myself because I actually quite like sweet corn. But again, fattening. And what do I care? What do I care? I'll never be a supermodel. I'm too old and I'm too short and too well padded. So there is that. I could be a plus size supermodel. I could be a geriatric plus size supermodel. Sure, there's a niche out there. Old ladies. Someone out there doesn't mind me being well-heeled. Well-heeled. Well-padded. Well-heeled means you've got money, doesn't it? Well, sorry boys, I just fell down that rabbit hole, down into that abyss. Well, you have to laugh. Anyway, so I came home, ate the chocolate sultanas, and hung out with my little birdie boys, Kermie and Bo, and went to work, put myself to work, sawing out my little butterflies and filing the rough edges, and now my hands are really sore again. But I want to finish that project. And then I sat here and I thought, I rang my friend Jared, see how he's getting along. He's doing fine, working hard in his new job. And then I thought, what shall I do? I'll come and read stories to my YouTube audience, and we'll together we'll educate ourselves on the occult, and we will literally kill time. Can you kill time, really? Waste time, pass time, stymie time, create new time, live your best life no matter what, no matter who. Yeah, babies, that's the way. So anyway, the Mamatu's going to continue on with reading Man, Myth and Magic. Please excuse me snuffling. I've got some paper here, but I'm body and I'll snuffle first. And we'll continue reading. We're up to page 58, soldiering through quite well, about a third of the way through the book. And today's offerings is about Alexander the Great. Have I read that already to you in another video though? Because I did read some stories in another video. I do believe I've read that to you. And it's too hard for me to go back and look it up. Father gods. Maybe I didn't, because I'm pretty sure I remember I read blood and some other thing. It just feels familiar, but bear in mind, this book's extremely familiar because I've owned it since I was 15 years old and I've gone through it a few times. So Mama T's got deja vu. I don't like to repeat things. I like to be fresh and innovative and unique. But anyway, I think it's only one page, about, no, 2 pages, 3, 2.5. All right, instead of worrying about whether I'm repeating things or not, because I can't remember, to be honest, oopsie daisy, let's just plough ahead. If it's repeated, some of you have seen this video for the first time. You won't know that it's repetitive, and c'est la vie, mes enfants. Right, here we go, the Mamati. Here's a wonderful mosaic of found in Pompeii, and now in the Museo Nazionale Naples. Very handsome looking man, wasn't he? He was well renowned as being handsome even back in ancient times. Alexander the Great. He looks very Macedonian with his very large eyes, aquiline nose and kissable lips. Would I want to kiss a man who's like 2,000 years old or however? When did he live? What year? 323 BC he died. I don't think I want to kiss him. He's a bit too old for me. There is that. Also a bit too dead, but as I wrote this morning on Facebook, if the living men are terrified of me, then I'm left with the bards, the poets, the troubadours, the playwrights, the artists. Zombie dead men, my muses that come to assist me, am I right? Which I don't mind at all, as long as they're respectful. Don't try to act like succubi or incubi, or whichever the case, incubi, because that's not acceptable behaviour, people there. Right, on that little note, it's funny how my brain goes in little whirling dervishes, isn't it? Let us read Alexander. Before we read that, I'll show you the picture on the right. Alexander examines the talking tree. Here he is. These little faces in the tree, which I can only assume are meant to represent spirits. There's a horse and all sorts of creatures in that tree. Here he is, dressed up, looking very orientally dressed, like an Asian gentleman. I guess he did go conquer Asia at that time period. Right, let us continue. Alexander the Great. One of his eyes was black and the other yellow. That's interesting, isn't it? He went to the end of the earth and the bottom of the sea and flew through the air. He encountered all kinds of monsters and wonders. I'm a bit sus about the flying through the air and going to the bottom of the sea, but we do know he did travel very widely, so that part is true. Alexander the Great led his triumphant armies from Greece to the Nile and on into India, created a vast empire which no one afterwards could hold together, and died before he was 33. So he was clearly highly intelligent and a bit of a statesman to hold a vast empire together that no one could hold together after his death. I bet you that would have ground his gears, thinking, I'm going to die and I'm going to leave this empire to all these morons and they're just going to let it all unravel. That would upset me greatly too. It really would. There's nothing worse than conquering entire empires only to watch usually your feckless, spoilt progeny piss it all up against the wall. Well, the Mamati never created an empire because she kept being robbed by narcissists and psychopaths, most of whom were in her own family bloodlines, family of origin. My mother, my father, my paedophile godfather, my paedophile stepfather, and the last con man my mother married, who fairly certain was a paedophile too, kept trying to lure my daughters to have sleepovers there. I said, hell no, they won't go. So there was that. Someone has to break the chains, break the intergenerational trauma, and draw a line in the sand, am I right? Well, that's someone. It's a man. Right, where were we? So he died before he was 33, which is incredibly young to die actually. Especially for an emperor. Thinking about that. Probably died in battle. Can't remember now. We'll read on and we'll find out, won't we? Deified in his own lifetime, he was recognized as a god by the Greek cities of the League of Corinth. His astonishing career caught the imagination of succeeding generations. 400 years after his death at Babylon in 323 BC, the Emperor Trajan, one of the ablest of Roman generals and rulers, went to ruined Babylon and offered sacrifice to Alexander's spirit in the room where he had died 400 years after his death. He was still held in such extremely high esteem. Quite the man. I'm impressed. Very impressed. Right. Legendary stories clustered round Alexander's memory, like limpets on a rock, and were retold for hundreds of years with alterations, additions, and shifts of emphasis. They spread across Europe and Asia, as far west as Ireland and as far east as Java, Java being an island in Indonesia. Or was it all of Indonesia back in the day? Perhaps it was. The core of the later romance of Alexander was a book written in Greek at Alexandria after 200 BC by an unknown writer now called Pseudo-Callisthenes, because the book was originally wrongly attributed to a real Callisthenes. The original is lost, but 4 revisions of it have survived. It combined accurate historical material with legend. Later authors expanded it and translated it into other languages, with liberal additions in which they mingled material from reliable historians with imaginative fictions of their own invention, and fables that were originally independent of Alexander. They often quoted letters supposedly, but not really, written by Alexander or to him. It's getting hot in here. Put the heater on now, hot. Off it can go. Just as many of us now cannot feel any bond of sympathy with a character in fiction who is too far from our own likeness, a monstrous Martian or Venusian, for instance, so each different audience for the tales of Alexander made him one of themselves by giving him their own setting, nationality, and outlook, which explains the picture on the right where he definitely looks Chinese, or yes, definitely looks like a Chinese soldier there. As a result, he appears as an object lesson in the workings of fate, or as a saintly Christian, though he lived long before Christ, as a benefactor of the Jews, an emissary of Allah, a noble medieval knight, or even as an incarnation of the devil, because he was a predecessor of the Antichrist, Antiochus IV Epiphanes. See Antichrist. At the world's end, the extent of Alexander's travels, he only stopped reluctantly when he had invaded India, because his soldiers refused to go any further east. Inspired, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, here we go again. No? Done. Okay. Inspired stories about him reaching the end of the earth, where paradise, the fountain of life, and other marvels were to be found. Just going to, excuse me a moment, I'm going to blow my nose. It's going to be epic. I'm going to do that off camera. Right. It's a bit better. I can breathe now. Sort of, kind of. Right, here we go. My beautiful ones, my darlings, my sweethearts, my fellow earthlings, my interdimensional ones. Well, you're not mine, but well, you are. You come to this channel and you tolerate my weird ways. Kind of are mine. You're my audience, my subscribers, my sweethearts, my darlings, my angels. I know, I'm not being sarcastic, I'm quite serious. It's a lot putting up with the time. Very few people have managed to do it. Very few precious people can sustain the time for the long term. I decided not to be coy about blowing my nose. Noses get blown every day. As long as my heart doesn't get blown apart ever again, I'll be good with that. Right. Some of these stories were told to draw a moral. A Jewish tale in the Babylonian Talmud before 500 AD says that Alexander reached the earthly paradise, but was turned back at the gate because only the just can enter here. Interesting, isn't it? But he was given a mysterious ball as a present, which turned out to be an eyeball. Let me just think about that a little bit. They did say eyeball, didn't they? They didn't say eyeglass, they said eyeball. Alright, we continue to read. Suspend belief, people of earth. Sometimes you just have to suspend belief. Right. The eye, like Alexander himself, is restlessly insatiable and tries to encompass the whole earth, and yet only a handful of dust dropped on it blinds it and blots it out, the dust, of course, being death to which all men come, even the most successful. This is true, people of earth. Doesn't pay to have too much vanity and hubris, because ultimately Santa Muerte, or Lord Death, takes us into the next dimension, hopefully peacefully at our appointed times. Dear Goddess. Right. This story was expanded later and appears in the 12th century in the German Lay of Alexander and the Latin King Alexander's Journey to Paradise. Alexander and his companions voyaged up the Ganges, or the Euphrates, till they came to the wall of a great city. There was no opening in the wall, and they sailed on beside it for 3 days before they found a small window. When an old man came to the window, Alexander's lieutenants imperiously demanded tribute from the city. The old man sent them away, telling them that the city was the earthly paradise, the home of the blessed, and gave them a stone of mystic meaning as a present for Alexander. Alexander took the stone back to Babylon, where various wise men puzzled their wits to find its meaning. At last, an aged Jew demonstrated with scales that the stone was heavier than any quantity of gold, but if a little dust was sprinkled on it, it was lighter than a feather. The stone stood for Alexander himself, the greatest of monarchs in life. A feather would outweigh his value once dusty death had claimed him. There is the same motif in the story of how, on the way to the wells of life, Alexander came to a lake in which was an island, and on the island a castle, and over the castle's gateway was written, "No man may go in to the greatest and least treasure of the world until he has passed the night of fear." Alexander and his men spent the night beating off the terrifying and dangerous attacks of tigers and dragons, monstrous crabs, lions the size of bulls, mice the size of foxes, foul bats, and an army of wild men with 6 hands each. 6 hands. In the morning, the castle's drawbridge was lowered. They went in and saw a niche in the wall, above which was written, "The greatest treasure and the least." In the niche was a rich cushion, and on it a stone shaped like an egg. When they looked into the stone, they saw everything that a man could desire in this world, and when they weighed it against gold and silver, it was heavier than all their treasure. But when a pinch of dust was put in the other pan of the scales, it outweighed the stone. Within 100 years of his death, Alexander was already said to have gone to the world's end, looking for the water of life which conferred immortality, like other heroes. What was originally a separate story about the Green One, who drank the water of life and became immortal, was tacked on to Alexander in the tale of his cook. Nearing the world's end, Alexander's expedition came to an area of many wells. The cook washed a dried fish in one of them, and the fish came to life and swam away. The cook drank some of the water, became immortal, and promptly turned green, the colour of vegetation which is reborn every spring. But the cook could not find the right well again. Furious, Alexander tried various methods of killing him, which all failed because he was immortal, and finally threw him into the sea, where he lives to this day as a sea spirit. It's a bit rude, isn't it? Blimey. Right, I'll just show you these pictures before I continue reading. The extent of Alexander's victorious travels inspired stories about him reaching the ends of the earth, where he found all kinds of marvels. He also explored the limits of height and depth, flying in the air and descending to the bottom of the sea. Above, the first submarine voyage from a manuscript in the British Museum, and below, Alexander flies through the air in a basket drawn by 6 griffins. He was supposed to have steered them by dangling a piece of liver on a spear in front of their beaks. So above is the first submarine, and below the flying basket, or casket in that case, drawn by 6 griffins. Which makes me think of, because of my interest, UFOs and USOs. The knowledge retained in the mythology, or the memory of having witnessed such strange craft. Just my opinion. It's not based on any, evidential proven fact, but I find it interesting that those things are described in the stories back in pre-Christian days. What were they seeing, people of Earth? Right, I'll read this little insert here. Marvels and monsters of the East. We came to a wood inhabited by wild men with faces like ravens. We arrived at the country of the people whose feet are twisted, and next we came to the land of the lion-headed men. We came to a river where we saw a tree which grew from dawn to the 6th hour of the day, and which diminished from the 6th hour until night. We marched through a wilderness and arrived at the ocean. We saw what appeared to be an island, and 20 of my men tried to swim there, but beasts came up out of the water and devoured them. We came to the land of the people having their eyes and mouths in their breasts. I've actually heard of that before, by the way. We saw the palm bird, in brackets, phoenix. After a march of 65 days, we arrived at Obakia and saw two birds, one of which spoke Greek. We marched towards the east, and after 10 days arrived at a high mountain where a dragon lived. I caused the dragon to be slain. We marched on and arrived at a river called Basatis and a high mountain. I left my troops and with 200 of my friends marched to China in 25 days. From a fabricated letter of Alexander the Great to his former tutor, the philosopher Aristotle, in the Syrian version of Pseudo-Callisthenes, translated by E.A.W. Bunch. Fiction from fact. Many of the stories were built up around a grain of historical truth, like a pearl in an oyster. The daughter of a Scythian king, offered in marriage to the real Alexander, but declined with thanks, turned into a queen of the Amazons, who visited the legendary Alexander with amorous intent. Ladies. Another example is the famous story of Alexander's birth, which represented him as the son of a god. The real Alexander was the son of King Philip of Macedon in northern Greece and his queen Olympias. When he drove the Persians out of Egypt, he was accepted as pharaoh, and when he visited the oracle of the god Ammon in the desert, as pharaoh, he was formally hailed by the priest as son of Ammon. On this basis, apparently, Pseudo-Callisthenes and other Egyptian authors said that Alexander was not really the son of Philip of Macedon. They said that the wise Nectanebus, king of Egypt, skilled in magic and astrology, fled before the invading Persians to Macedon and told Olympias that Ammon would father a child on her. Find that interesting turn of phrase? Father a child on her as opposed to with her, which implies that she was not consensual. Just saying. Which Nectanebus, pretending to be the god and disguised as a dragon or a snake, duly did. Reptilians come to mind. The legend may not be as cynical as it looks at first sight. Nectanebus may have been meant to be both himself and the vehicle of the god, for in Egyptian belief, a pharaoh was a god, indeed. Plutarch, who lived at the turn of the first, who lived at the turn of the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, suggested that the snake came into the story because Olympias was a devotee of Dionysus and danced with snakes twined round her in the frenzy of his worship. Interesting. The sky and the seabed. Alexander's rule of the West, in brackets, Greece, as well as the East, greatly impressed posterity and may account for the notion that one of his eyes was black, the West, sunset, and the other yellow, the East, sunrise. It may lie behind his Arabic title, Dul Kanaim, the two-horned, meaning that he had subdued both horns of the sun, or the horns may be those of Ammon, whose animal was the ram, which is the symbol of Aries in astrology. So, springtime in the Middle East. It was not unfitting to suppose that he had also gone to the limits of height and depth, and so in legend he goes down to the bottom of the sea in a green glass box banded with iron. Which we'll see here again, I'll show it to you again. And flies through the air in a chariot drawn by birds or griffins, which he steered by dangling a bit of liver enticingly on a spear in front of their beaks. His other legendary feats included shutting up the savage tribes of Gog and Magog behind a wall of iron and brass from which they will pour out to wreak havoc in the last day, a story which appears in the Quran. He made love to the beautiful Candace, Queen of Ethiopia or of India. He tamed a vicious man-eating horse. Which became his favourite war charger and which was called Bucephalus, the bull-headed, because it had horns. A horse with horns of a bull that eats men, that he tamed as his war charger. He met and defeated innumerable monsters and peculiar humans, gigantic ants, female cannibals, giants with 6 heads, dwarves with 1 leg, horses with the faces of men, centaurs, men with the faces of dogs, dog men, and in the English, King Alexander, the people who stand on 1 foot all day, gazing steadfastly at the sun. In the 14th century, Chaucer said that the tales of Alexander were so common that every wight that hath discretion hath heard somewhat or all of his fortune. And Philip the Bold of Burgundy took Alexander for his hero and model, in much the same way that Alexander himself had conceived a great admiration for the Homeric hero Achilles. It was not until the revival of classical scholarship in the Renaissance, that the legend of Alexander began to go out of fashion and to be replaced by sober history. Sounds very disappointing, doesn't it? Sober history. Or at least factual, perhaps less mythical and fantastic, but awful lot less fun before that. He has not lasted as well as King Arthur, about whose real life far less is known, and few of the stories about him are still common currency. He wept because there were no more worlds to conquer. When at the height of his power, he asked the philosopher Diogenes what he could do for him. Diogenes replied, "You're standing in my light." He cut the Gordian knot which no one had been able to untie. When he was told that whoever undid the knot would rule the East, he slashed it with his sword. But you may be reminded of him when you hear the British Grenadiers. Some talk of Alexander. Further reading for the literary history of the legend, see G. Carey, The Medieval Alexander, Cambridge University Press, 1967. And the picture above is a detail from the Alexander sarcophagus of the 4th century BC, showing him in battle wearing a lion's skin, the attribute of the great hero Hercules. I can't see the lion's skin. Am I looking at the wrong one? Perhaps. But anyway, here it is. Here it is, Hercules. Alexander the Great. Right, the next little, it's only a paragraph, is about Algol. Algol, A-L-G-O-L. Bright white star in the constellation Perseus, widely regarded as evil because a dark star which revolves round it dims its light at intervals and gives it the look of a malevolent, winking eye. Named Demon's Head by the Arabs, by the Jews Satan's head, and later Lilith, a demoness of the night. It's open to interpretation, people of this, but anyway. In Judeo-Christian thought, she is indeed a demon. She was demonized for refusing to be submissive to the first Adam and have sex in a missionary position, you understand. She wasn't going to lie under any man and be deemed less than. I kind of understand how she feels. It's probably why she came to me as a muse back in October, November 2019. Anyway, odd but true. Fortunately, she doesn't interfere in my sex life, or I too would be a demoness by now. Thank all the gods for small mercies, am I right? Anyway, you have to laugh. It's kind of quaint. classical authors said it was the head of Medusa the Gorgon hanging from Perseus's belt. So here we have a picture of the constellation Algol and what it actually looks like. Right, the next one is Algonquin Indians. Algonquin myths inspired both Longfellow's Hiawatha and the Brer Rabbit stories, which are also some of my favourites. Their religion centred on nature, the sacred plants, the great rabbit, the young girls walking through the fields naked. Here we have a picture of The Flyer, an Algonquin medicine man by John White. He is acting out the myth of the bird which carries messages between the earth and the world of spirits. He has a dried bird on his head, and the otter skin at his belt contains magic charms. The original Algonquins, or fish sparers, lived in a single village in Canada, in the area now covered by the city of Ottawa. Later on, the name was used for a group of small tribes who allied themselves with the French settlers in Canada against the Iroquois Indians. But these tribes were in fact only the northern division of a larger group of Indian tribes speaking similar languages called the Algonquin or Algonquian or Algonquian linguistic group. They ranged along the eastern seaboard of North America and inland to the prairies. They did not realize that they were probably all related and were in a constant state of intertribal warfare, which was later complicated by the arrival of the white man. Indeed, very much a complication that was to the Anishinaabe people. So, frenetic activity, cars going up and down this evening. I don't know what all my neighbours are doing, they're all very busy. Well, I'm busy too, reading to my audience. Right, where were we? Yes, Complications by White Men. Now speak as a white woman. Nothing to be proud of, all that horrendous, systemic and colonialist abuses that went on. It was the Algonquin-speaking Indians with whom the first European colonists made contact in the 16th century. The Elizabethan painter John White met them in Virginia and left an invaluable collection of paintings of them. The delightful and intelligent Princess Pocahontas, who married an English settler, was one of them. Sorry, I have to sigh because she had a very sad and tragic life too. They taught the Pilgrim Fathers to grow maize and hunt turkeys. It was one of their women praying to the Manitous, spirit beings, in the cornfields who unwittingly set off the Salem witchcraft tragedy. See Salem. Well, I didn't know that. That's quite interesting. It is an Algonquin mythology which Longfellow used in his Song of Hiawatha. The name Hiawatha is that of a great Iroquois Lone Pine chief, but everything else in the narrative poem is Algonquin, and I do have a copy of that book, and I might read it to you one day, though the language is a little bit stilted, but, well, I've fought my way through other difficulties reading difficult dialects. The holy fireplace. The Algonquin speaking tribes, I might make a little note actually to remind me, and I've offered to read my YouTube audience. The Song of Hiawatha. There we go. Made a note of it, but it may not actually happen. But we'll see. I do have a copy of it here, so why not? Why not indeed? Anything can happen at Titania's realm. And I like to read from different cultures all over the earth. It's a kind of an anthropological and magical way of being inclusive and sharing stories from and mythologies from all over our earth, Gaia, Sophia, according to your traditions. Right, where were we? The holy fireplace. The Algonquin-speaking tribes practiced agriculture and lived more on the produce of their fields of maize and pumpkins than by hunting. Their villages were usually near rivers and good fishing grounds. Houses were made from saplings bent into arches, which supported walls and roofs made from sheets of bark. In some villages, each house held a single family. In others, there were long houses, large constructions used by several related families, each of which had an individual screened compartment and, very important, a family fireplace. Sounds similar to the Viking longhouse, sharing accommodation in that way also. There was something holy about the fireplace, for all the tribe's people understood that fire was the gift of God and in itself was holy. Amen to that. But I'm a fire sign and I sport the burning bush tattoo on my arm, so I resonate with fire. I also am very fond of water too. Thus, it balances out my energies. Thus, the family fireplace was something of a shrine. In addition, all food was given by God, and all food, plants and animals had a living soul. I agree with that too. All villages included sacred dancing grounds where the shamans, or rather medicine men, met and conducted ceremonies during which they made contact with the spirit world, putting the living people of the tribe in touch with the world of their ancestors and with the great spiritual powers. In other words, keeping ancestral knowledge alive in contemporary times, which can be actually life-saving beneficial. See also COVID epoch. Right, Mama T has spoken. If you honoured your old ways, you wouldn't have fallen into that trap so easily. Just shake it off. It's awful beyond belief. The Algonquins do not seem to have evolved a special type of building as a temple, but many of the medicine men and women, too, were inspired by the spirits in their own houses. Such places were regarded with awe, but the power was associated with the shaman and not with the building, indeed. The real holy places were usually out in the open air, and they were marked by rings of wooden posts carved with heads of ancestors and spirits, as John White drew them in 1587. Before we continue, I'll just read this little insert here. The Singer of Paradise. Chipiapus, protector of the land of the dead in Algonquin myth, is the gentle singer of Hiawatha. Most beloved by Hiawatha was the gentle Chipiapus. He, the best of all musicians, he, the sweetest of all singers. Beautiful and childlike was he, brave as man is, soft as a woman, pliant as a wand of willow, stately as a deer with antlers. All the many sounds of nature borrowed sweetness from his singing. All the hearts of men were softened by the pathos of his music, for he sang of peace and freedom, sang of beauty, love and longing, sang of death and life undying. In the islands of the blessed, in the kingdom of Ponema, in the land of the hereafter. Longfellow, The Song of Hiawatha. The Shaman and the Great Rabbit. The Algonquin tribes as a whole, in common with most American Indians, believed that human contact with the unseen powers came through specially selected individuals. These shamans or medicine men were usually marked out in childhood by some unusual psychological features. They might experience visions, suffer epileptic fits, show homosexual tendencies, dress in women's clothes, or go away alone for long periods. No doubt a modern psychiatrist could have made them normal citizens, but in their own culture they were regarded as facing difficulties set from the spirit world, to which they were thought to be closer than ordinary men. They were usually sent to study further as assistants to well-known shamans. Again, this book is using politically incorrect and modern contemporary thought. names because American Indians or indigenous peoples of America get very offended about calling medicine men shamans. Shamans, they say, quite accurately, come from the Atlas Mountains in Siberia, and they don't like being conflated with shamans, although they perform pretty much the same function. So I just wanted to press that point that you want to upset a Native American medicine man, call him a shaman, give you a bit of a side eye and who knows what else. But anyway, so here, what I just read, they were usually sent to study further as assistants to well-known shamans because it has a lineage. You learn from, the elders in the tribe, the experts, and then it gets passed on down through the tribe to initiates who show promise of being skilled medicine persons. Sometimes they lost their strange magical personalities when they reached puberty. It's often the case. But many passed on to become shamans of importance. The medicine men were intermediaries between the people and the spirits, which at times took possession of them. Each had his own branch of magic in which he specialised, and could call on brother shamans to help on special occasions. They were expected to help the tribe's people in all seasons of difficulty. They healed the sick, found lost property, smelled out evil magic, forecast the weather, and consoled the family in time of death. Yet they never became great chiefs. They were too unstable to be trusted with power. I kind of have to laugh at that. It's not strictly true, that comment. A very famous story of a Sioux medicine man and a Sioux chief at the top of a mountain escaping white men, one of the many wars that were happening in America at that time period. Can't remember the name of the mountain, but it's a famous story. It happens to be true. And, the United States Army, and probably the British and the French as well, had them under siege and surrounded on top of that mountain. I think it was for about 3 days and 3 nights. And they couldn't get them to come down, and they had to try to climb up to them. And just at the point when they decided that they would go and conquer them and take them prisoner, they saw 2 hawks fly from the top of the mountain. And so, having observed that, they decided to climb the mountain to take the chief and the medicine man prisoner. And to their astonishment, discovered there was no one there. They had turned themselves into hawks to escape them. And I don't know why, but I somehow find that believable. Maybe my magical thinking, you understand, but as I read to you about atavism at one time, skilled magicians, medicine men, shamans are able to change their form under particular circumstances. I don't know how they do it, and I can only imagine it would be a very intense process, but somehow they still had that knowledge. That would have been in the early 1800s or late 1700s when America was being colonised. So, but anyway, the author here rather condescendingly writes, they were too unstable to be trusted with power. And again, whatever, babies. But their ability to see into the future was used to assist a chief to assess the value of his line of policy. See also shaman. John White painted a picture of the shaman in The Flyer. I'll just show that to you again. It's a very lovely painting. He is indeed mimicking being a bird, possibly practicing transmutation into a bird. I actually do seriously believe that actually did happen. There was no other way off the mountain, so the only way they could escape was by turning themselves into birds. Right, now, the shaman is dancing and lifting himself as if he were a bird. His balletic action is magically aided by a dried bird attached to his hair, and no doubt by the magic charms in the otter skin tucked in his belt. But for all the apparent freedom of his dance, he is expressing part of a well-defined group of religious myths. He is the bird which arises from earth, as it did once from the waters before the earth was born. He rises to the world of the Manitus, spirit beings, from which he will return, bringing messages to the people. The shaman's dance was most likely a round dance, just as the ceremonial posts around the sacred ground were set in a circle. This was natural enough because he was concerned with the circuit of the heavens. The circular movement of the zodiac constellations around the sky was seen as a procession of the heavenly powers. Among them moved the sun, who was not only a Manitou of power, but a form of the strange creator spirit, who was also conceived as a great rabbit or a white hare. I bought a shot plate recently of the hare and the moon. I've got to buy some sturdy silver sheet and hammer it out, make some lovely earrings or pendant from it. But I couldn't resist. In the more recent days of Negro slavery in America, some of the slaves from Ashanti in West Africa mixed with Indians of Algonquin stock, amalgamated their own spirit, Anansi, famous as a trickster, with the Algonquin great rabbit, and so produced the world of the Brer Rabbit Brer Rabbit stories, which are some of my favourites. Brer Rabbit's always cunning and tricky and always gets one over on his enemies. That's why he's my favourite. The Battle of the Brothers. Actually, no, before I continue reading, I'll just read the little blurbs and show you the drawings. Left, the Algonquin village of Sikoton from a watercolour by John White. In the foreground are the holy ring of posts and the sacred fire, the place of solemn prayer. Ah, yes. And then you can see their houses made out of tree bark and formed by hoops. There's the fire. And there's the sacred dancing space where they're dancing around in a circle. And here you can read, is written down, corn newly sprung, meaning newly pushed up from the earth. Can't quite see it where the focus done it. And here in the middle is their green corn, and at the top their ripe corn, ready for harvesting. It's interesting, isn't it, people of Earth? It's really interesting. Under the picture of the tribesmen dancing, he's written, a ceremony in their prayers, prayer history, and I'm having trouble reading the rest, served as the I can't make out the rest. Anyway, and here we have below Religious Dance of the Algonquin Indians by John White. Their holy places were usually in the open and were marked by a ring of wooden posts carved with heads of ancestors and spirits. The rattles and corn are symbols of fertility, which makes sense. Looks like quite an vigorous athletic dance because this man's lifted his thigh right up high, and this woman, I'm assuming she's a woman because she has breasts, is also kicking her leg back, or lifting their legs very high, so it implies that they're jumping very high, whirling dervish and twirling. Oh, I almost feel like being there with them. Looks like a lot of fun. Right, here we go. The Battle of the Brothers. Important among the Algonquin-speaking tribes were the Cree of the western plains and forests, and their neighbours to the southeast, the Chippewa Ojibwe. Among these tribes, who to a large extent escaped the colonial wars between the Europeans, the old mythology survived long enough to be recorded by scientific scholars. The survival of the old ideas was greatly helped by the secret society of the shamans known as the Meduan. I had a Meduan friend on Paltalk, did some lovely healing on me, and was very kind to me. And he hoped that his magic would help me find a life partner, but instead it drew in that dreadlocked nitwit who was sadomasochistic and awful. And wow, there was a good 6 years gone while I healed from that awfulness. But he meant well. His magic was quite legitimate and quite powerful. It was just unfortunate that yet again I drew in a narcissist. So disappointed to this day, but it is what it is. At least he was willing to work with me and try and heal my ridiculous life path of awful sexual love relationships that are actually life-threatening and toxic as fuck and just awful. Just why I ceased bothering even trying after a while. Why I'm a bit disappointed that things fell apart in the last friendship, because it's just a repeat pattern of awfulness. But anyway, my Mama T will carry on living her best life and dancing her dance and enjoying her life, and that too is my power and my magic and my resilience and my joy and my self-determination and my wildness and my independence. And you know, I'm old now at 60, but you never know. One day someone might come along and be heartfelt and genuine and authentic and sincere. And let's hope that I recognise that when they do. Don't fall for another trickster or liar or cheat or sadistic game player, because I had quite enough of that in my life history, people of Earth. But anyway, that Meduan man was an amazing man actually. I met him on Paltalk. Meduan is actually, he explained to me, 3 levels below a medicine man. He was aspiring to become a medicine man one day. I don't know if he actually managed it, because we didn't fall out, but we just lost contact over time. But he did a lot of healing on me. At that time when I met him on Paltalk, I was struggling really badly, suffering like a wild animal, fighting my evil mother's vicious, cruel, salacious rule dispute. And there were 4 occasions during that 2.5 years where I became so distraught and so despairing that I was actually quite actively thinking about suicide, and I was very, very mentally beaten down. And he came into my life during that time period and said, whatever you need, Tanya, I will support you and send you healing. And he was indeed very kind. And although we haven't been in contact since about 2012, I had some strange things happening in recent months. A male spirit of a male man, don't know if it was a living man or someone who passed, but I had a male energy climb into bed with me for a few nights. About 3-4 weeks ago, and I wondered if he'd passed, if it was my friend, my Meduan friend, because we had a connection. We weren't lovers or anything sexual, but we had an intense spiritual connection where he would send me energy in American time zone, which was, I would be sleeping or about to go to sleep, and he would be in daytime because of the time difference. And I would pick up on his energy, and then I'd get on Paltalk and I'd message him and said, was that you? I just saw, he would send me his totem, his wolf, and I just saw your wolf. And he said, oh, did you see it? And I went, yes. And then he said, I met your wolf. I don't have a totem because I'm not Indigenous Native American, so I can only legitimately refer to my wolf as my spirit animal. But anyway, he said, I saw your wolf, and he said, whoa. I said, well, you shouldn't come to my bedroom uninvited without giving me pre-warning, should you? He said, no, I won't be doing that again. I met your wolf. I was like, wow, I didn't know that my wolf was so protective that she actually put the wind up a bona fide Native American Maduan man, a healing man. So that was an interesting thing to discover because I didn't know that before we had that conversation. And so when I had this spirit climbing into bed, they didn't try anything sexual, thank the gods, because I would have freaked the fuck out. But they would sort of roll into bed beside me on the side where a man would sleep if I have a partner, and they would just roll over and kind of look at me for a few seconds. And I didn't feel threatened, but I was weirded out because it's a boundary violation. So I kind of said, who are you? But they didn't tell me anyway. It happened for about 3 or 4 nights, and then I started doing, saying my Jewish liturgy, Shema prayers and protection prayers, because I wasn't sure who that entity was or what they wanted. But I actually suspect that it might have been him and he passed, and that was his way of coming to say goodbye. Because often I have a long history that when friends or acquaintances, men and women, when they pass on, very often, sometimes they might come to me within weeks of passing, other times it can take, a year or 2, but usually it's within about 3 weeks. I'll dream of them, surrounded in golden light, and they'll be smiling at me and nodding, or I'll dream of them communicating with me, and then I know I wake up and so-and-so's died, how can I find out for sure? That happened when my former boss was my first boss when I was 15 years old. I went to work for her in her very famous coffee shop in Wellington, New Zealand called Susie's Coffee Lounge. And I dreamt of her some years ago. And I didn't know she had passed. She was in her 70s, but I hadn't had contact with her for many, many years, 25 years, something like that, long time. Hadn't thought about her for quite some time either, And when I dreamt of her, she was a Dutch woman. When I dreamt of her, she had her hair all piled on top, all elegant, exactly how she used to wear her hair. Very nice avant-garde clothes. She used to wear very unusual clothes. She's a very wealthy woman. And she just appeared to me sitting in a window, and there were streams of golden light just radiating all around her. As soon as I dreamt that, saw that in the dream, I knew. I said, hello, Susie. She said, hello. And she just faded out. I woke up and I immediately went on Facebook and I said, I've just dreamt of Susie van der Kwast, who was my first boss when I was 15 years old, the owner of Susie's Coffee Lounge. She was quite well known in Wellington, in my home city. And immediately I got a message back from my friend Sally Castle, who said, yes, she has indeed died. She died 3 weeks ago. And she sent me a link to the article about her eulogy, or about the article that was written about her. So immediate confirmation that she had indeed died. I said, oh, thank you so much, Sally, because sometimes I worry that I'm going crazy when I have these dreams. And no, she said, no, you were quite, she definitely must have come to say goodbye to you, Tony, because she has passed. And sometimes I find out, that former acquaintances or friends have passed away before even sometimes their family members. So I have to keep that a bit quiet sometimes, not to freak them out, and wait until they get the news, and then when they tell me, I just nod and offer my condolences. But often I get told by the actual spirit that they've passed on. And it's a bit weird. I don't know why I'm like that, but I've been like that since I was 3 years old, when I took my family friend, a Zulu man, and led him around the garden house and told him to say goodbye to everything. He was very elderly and quite ill, but of course it humoured me, and a week later he died. So my little 3-year-old self already had that ability to sense when someone is about to pass. Fortunately, it hasn't happened too often in later years. Instead of me predicting someone passing, which is a horrible, horrible thing, because you can't say anything, you can't do anything about it, and you can't say anything because you'll freak people the fuck out. So instead of that, the spirits come to me to say, basically, see me one last time before they transition into the next dimension or the light. And I also have had a habit, not so much in recent years, of predicting births too, which was a bit astonishing and caught people a little bit out of left field, freaked out the neighbours behind me and didn't want to speak to me for quite a few weeks. I said, it's not my fault. I don't control your penis and your vagina, but a soul is coming and it's a girl. And I was right. So then when they had just fallen pregnant with their second child, they hadn't told anyone. I just bumble along to the back fence and chatting to them. I said, there's another baby coming. How do you know that? I don't know, but I said, again, it will be a girl. This time they really freaked out. They said, we actually know that we're pregnant with this one, but we haven't told anyone. I just said, aha. It's not my fault if I pick up on these things. But we have kind of a bit of a connection spiritually, which is probably why I guessed about their babies coming along, because we're both of Polish descent. So I think that might have been the link there. Anyway, let me continue with the story. This society, as in the Meduan society, had a method of writing in pictorial code. Their pictures scratched on birch bark or painted on skin recorded the legends of the gods, and also notes on tribal history. I'll just go back to revert to that story about my friend. His name was John, but I think his pal nick was Rex. I referred to him as Rex because we all used each other's nicknames. But he said to me, this is kind of a funny story, I don't mind sharing because it's cute and it's funny. Bear in mind, in those days, I was very mentally unwell, very despairing and very devastated, barely hanging in there, barely holding on to my own life, people of Earth. That's how evil and vicious my stepsisters, my mother's last husband's spawn, were and are, no doubt, and how awful the wool dispute was. And I lost the wool dispute, but very little money. So actually, in the broad scheme of things, wasn't worth the immense traumas I was put through. But I got my car and I got my teeth done. I got my bed. So, it was a long, hard fight for a few things that I'm grateful for, but the trauma and the pain far outweighed the benefits. Analysis, just saying. But anyway, so this particular Meduan man one time He's messaging me on Paltalk. And he says to me, I'm going to light up your spirit, Tanya, because I know you want a partner. I said, I've always wanted a loving partner. I've been wanting it all my life, but, ever since I left my husband, who was nothing but vicious to me, I've just had no luck in love at all. In fact, I wasn't lucky marrying my first boyfriend and being married to a man who was vicious. I said, I've had no luck in love at all. And sometimes I said I get very distraught about it, and other times I'm like, I'm okay on my own. I said, I swing like the sword of Damocles between two extremes sometimes, wishing for a true love partnership and then being realistic that I've never found anyone that can take me on with my poverty and my mental health issues and my other health issues. And, so I go through periods where I'm like, I don't give a fuck and I don't need anyone. And I can do life alone, which I can. I've lived alone for 30 years. 10 of those years with my children till they grew up, but, been on my own for 30 years now. But at that time, it was 2012, so it was that 13 years ago. So he said, I will light your spirit up. It was beautiful the way he phrased it too. He really was a kind man. He was an Ojibwa man from the Central Plains people in America, and I think he lived in Indiana. Anyway, he said, I will light up your spirit, Tanya, so that you attract a man worthy of your light, who will love you as much as you love him and will be good and kind to you. Because this is like, to me, manna from heaven. It's the most wonderful fairy tale and dream that any psychedelic dreamer can dream. Well, he was the one that called me Mustang Quay, because he said my energy is to push, push, push like a wild horse through every obstacle, every evil, every situation, just being really resilient and just keep pushing through. So he named me that, Mustang Quay. That's my Ojibwa name, Mustang Quay. Anyway, very sweet he was. I'm going to light you up so you draw in, your true love man. The man who will recognise your light. And when you see him, Tanya, I said, how will I know he's the right man for me? Because this has been my problem all my life. Always investing my heart and mind and energy and emotions into men who didn't actually love me and weren't good and kind, or they presented as good and kind in the beginning, but then tore everything out from under me and tried to utterly destroy me, and 3 of them literally tried to kill me by strangulation. So, I said, I can't trust that I'll ever be able to trust in my choices, that I'm choosing a truly good, kind, honouring, loving, spiritually attuned man that's suitable for me. He said, you will. He said, I'll light you up to draw them in and attract them, and you will recognise them by their golden light. And I'm laughing now. It wasn't funny at the time. But I can laugh now because it's been quite some years. So when I met that English prat with the dreadlocks who was a narcissist and a psychopath and really quite vicious and cold and sadistic to me, when I met him, he was indeed surrounded by golden lights, which later on I realised was probably the fucking strobe lighting, because we were at a live band. I think it was Alter Egos, to be honest, or possibly Ramjack. He was surrounded by these beautiful lights, and I was, oh, here he is! And I was instantly drawn to him, and it was odd, because I'm not usually instantly drawn to men, actually. Usually quite wary and circumspect. So I thought mistakenly that he was the one, my, in Yiddish, Bashet, the meant to be for me. Well, I was wrong about that, obviously. Like, hello. He was it was awful. It was awful what he used to put me through. But anyway, but the funny thing about that was, I think I was still talking to Rex when I met that one. Or was it before that? No, I think I told him about it. Yes, I must have still been talking to Rex. So I've met someone who was indeed surrounded by golden light, as you predicted. He said, "Oh, that's good." He said, "This should be the love of your life. It should be the one, Tanya." Of course, I got terribly excited like a schoolgirl, didn't I? Because I thought, finally, after years and years of being alone, being with actual, men that were just out to use and abuse and were actual bastards, I thought, I finally found someone loving and kind. Alas, no. But anyway, so I contacted Rex and I said, I've met someone and he seems lovely, but it's too early to tell. And I'm very nervous about things potentially going wrong, as they often do. And Rex said to me, he said, it's funny that you contacted me today, Psychedelic Dreamer, which was my nickname in Pal Talk, because I dream psychedelic colours and technicolor. Nothing to do with drugs, people of Earth, just saying. And I have dabbled in cannabis from time to time on rare occasions, but I'm not normally a drug user of any real dedication, and avoid it at all times. I can't even cope with pharmaceutical medications, just don't agree with me, so I don't go there. I'll have my Jack Daniels and very rare occasions smoke a cigar in honour of the spirits, and that's the only drugs that I partake of. Anyway, alcohol being a drug and nicotine being a drug, you understand. So anyway, my wonderful Meduan friend says to me, "I was just talking about you today. It's interesting that you've contacted me." I said, "Well, we have quite an intense spiritual connection." I said, "I often sense you too in my daytime, your night." He said, "Oh, do you?" I said, "Yes, but I tell you when I sense you." So we had an agreement that we would, so that we could work out if it was, we knew it was a real connection, but we would just sort of take notes about time frames and work out the times. It was difficult because of the different time zone, try and work together spiritually. Anyway, he was a wonderful, kind, and he was a true friend, always very respectful, nothing sordid or, always very honouring, which I really liked about him, because I did not have a lot of honouring, respectful relationships up to and including that time, except for my wonderful psychiatrist and my friend Jared. So those kind of relationships with men I hold deeply precious, because I had a long history of, sexual improprieties and violations. So, so my Meduan friend says to me, I spoke to the medicine man today about you, Tanya." What? I said. He said, "Yes, I asked for advice." He said, "Because I'm reaching a block in the healing with you where I can't seem to push past it. It's kind of, there's a blockage there. I asked for advice because I've never experienced that before." I said, "That's because that's my spirit fighting you, holding you at bay, because I don't trust in, males generally, spiritually don't trust in them, but physically and sexually it's very hard, and emotionally very hard to trust in them, which is why it's a very evil thing for someone I loved and was a good friend to humiliate me as they did at that gig. But anyway, we're moving on from that now, people of Earth. Number 2's getting over it. But anyway, so my friend Rex says to me, yes, I spoke to my medicine man and I went to him for advice. And I said, I've got this friend that lives in Australia and she's New Zealand born but of European descent. And she's white and she's Jewish, and he laid out all my my pedigree, all my lineage and my situation. And he said, I tested her spirit, which is why I'm working with her, because we have a connection and she's picking up on my workings and I pick up on her receiving them, and we're having a good communication, responding backwards and forwards, so I know that we have a working, healing relationship. He said, but I've reached kind of a plateau and I can't get any further with it. I said, what did the medicine man say? He said, well, Tanya, you're not going to like this. And he starts giggling. And I said, what do you mean I'm not going to like it? Because immediately I made an assumption that it was to do with sex. He said, no, it's nothing like that, Tanya. I promise you it's nothing like that. I would never disrespect you sexually, Tanya. This is why he was a great Meduan and a wonderful healer. He knew not to push those buttons or play sick, cruel, emotional games about my sexuality and my womanliness. So it's a huge, huge dishonour when someone does that to me. And pretty much fucking unforgivable, by the way. I debriefed about it with my psychiatrist today again. He agreed that it was really foul. Anyway, so, but my Meduan friend Rex said to me, I spoke to the medicine man and he said to me, you need to tame her. Tame her. What? I said. What? This is all written in text, by the way. I think we did talk on mic sometimes too. What? I said. Tame me? Like the taming of the shrew? And because he's educated in Indiana in the United States of America, he didn't know what the taming of the shrew is, which is a play about a woman who refuses to marry, refuses to be tamed, and gets called the shrew, and I think it ends badly in the end, if I remember correctly the story. But anyway, he said, what do you mean, the taming of the shrew? I said, oh, it's an English play from England, and probably from the 16th, 17th century. Oh, he said, well, anyway, he said, I told him that you wouldn't like that. And I said, no. I said, Rex, Mustang Quay must never be tamed. To tame me is the equivalent of killing me. He said, yes, I recognise that in your spirit too. He said, but my medicine man just laughed and laughed and laughed and said, you need to tame her. And I laugh about it too now, but at the time I was really fucking incensed. And I must have told that nitwit with the dreadlocks, I won't say his name. If he watches my videos, I don't think he would, but I won't say his name because I'm not giving him that power, giving him the honour of his name, because he was just dead shit. But anyway, I must have told him at the time, and he laughed too, and he said, oh, now I know how to treat you. You need to be tamed. Because he was a fucking BDSM pervert, wasn't he? Yes, he was. And so I said, I wouldn't try that if I were you. Even a Maduan of very high status in the Ojibwa tribe knew not to go there, guy friend. And then we kind of laughed about it and I let it go. But I'm just sharing that story with you, people of Earth, because it's actually really cute and kind of amusing. The Maduan man knew not to go there, but the medicine man couldn't resist poking the bear, am I right? Poking the Mustang Quay. See what she says. Anyway, he went back and said, Mustang Quay says she will not be tamed. And the medicine man said, I suspected as much. So we're just kind of having a little bit of, innocent fun. I don't mind when it's innocent fun, not harmful. But when it's cruel and sadistic and dishonouring and foul, no. Mama T, Mustang Quay, psychedelic dreamer, Latanya says, no. Anyway, let us continue with that story triggered by reading about the Maduan. He didn't tell me that they had a method of writing in pictorial code or that their pictures were scratched on birch bark or painted on skin recorded the legends of the gods and also notes on tribal history. But he did send me a photo of him on his horse in full regalia. I was very impressed. Very impressed. Anyway, I don't know what happened, why it drifted off in the end. Because he was a very kind man and a wonderful Maduan. Wherever you are, John or Rex, may the Manatu of the Anishinaabe bless you and protect you always. I hope it wasn't you that was visiting me in my bedroom a few weeks ago, because that can mean only one thing, and that you have passed on into the light. Anyway, it is from, he was some years older than me too, probably 10 years older than me, which would make him about 70s. He's still young. He wouldn't have passed, would he? No. It was some other entity that was just trying its, pushing its boundaries. They didn't do me any harm, thankfully, but it was a bit confronting. Anyway, it is from the Cree in particular that we have the most complete form of the myths of the Algonquin-speaking peoples. Before the earth existed, there was water on which a few floating sticks were placed by 2 ducks. The animals came along and could find no solid ground to stand on. Those who could joined the ducks and dived to find more sticks. They made a raft on which they all lived. Then the great Manatu, which is creator or God, placed some sand on the raft. It grew and spread out. In his form of a white hare, he is still making the raft, which is the earth, bigger, and you hear him shaking the raft whenever there is an earthquake. It came about that death was sent to earth. As different groups of animals died, the Creator took their bodies and changed them, so that the first races of men came into being. There was a daughter of the children of men, and she gave birth to 4 divine sons. They were Nanabojo, the protector of humanity; Chipiapus, who died to become the protector of the land of the dead; Waboso, the maker of white, the magician and guardian of the north; and Chakakea, Chacakenopok, the flintstone and maker of fire, but also the winter. At his birth, the mother died. Thus, Nanebojo and Chacakenopok were destined to be enemies. It was not until Nanebojo had grown up that the two opposed brothers met. Then they stormed around the earth, rustling and tearing at each other. The magic deer horn which Nanebojo carried broke pieces off the body of Chacakenopok. These fell to the ground as pieces of flint. And at last, Nanebojo won the battle. Chacakenopok was torn to pieces and thrown over the earth. His bones became the ranges of mountains, and his intestines turned into the pleasant grapevines. There was a power granted by the Creator, which the Indians knew as a kind of magic breath called Orenda, see also air and breath. This was available to all the Manitous, who were the secret life of every created thing. Seeing that Nanebojo and his most beloved brother Chipirapus had become so powerful and beautiful, the various Manitous planned to kill them. Nanebojo knew all things and was able to elude the spells, but Chipirapus walked on the thick ice of the Great Lakes, and the Manitous used their Orenda magic breath to melt the ice. So Chipirapus drowned, and the Manitous hid his body at the very bottom of the lakes, from which it could never be recovered. For 6 years, Nanebojo wept for his brother in seclusion, and sent out his magical powers to destroy the Manitous. There's one thing, him trying to kill his brother, but it's different when someone else does it, am I right? Yep. Human nature. At last, I mean, you always have to laugh, but it's true. At last they managed to pacify her by sending their Orenda, magic breath, in bags to blow on him like soothing winds. They brought peace to his heart. 4 of the greater Manitous brought mourning gifts, tobacco, and magical medicine pouches made from animal skins. Nanebojo welcomed them as messengers of peace and accepted their invitation to visit their sacred house. There they gave him a drink which brought him peace and happiness. Oh, I could do with one of those right now. But I feel happy after telling you about my friend Rex or John. It's a lovely memory. There they gave him a drink which brought him peace and happiness. Then they combined to form the Society of the Meduan, and Nanebojo was the first initiate. Then they all summoned up the spirit of Chipirapus, and before sending him back to the underworld. They invested him with the powers of Lord of the land of the dead and guardian of souls. The sacred plants. It was Manobozho, who discovered the magical virtues of the plants, which were to be the food of the future human race of our own kind. He stored them in his magical hut and put the grandmother of humanity, excuse my very poor pronunciation of your Ojibwa, Misa Kumikokwe, in charge of them. Misa Kumikokwe. And so, when the Algonquins picked the food plants, they put a portion of their reaping on the ground as a thank offering to the ancient lady, our grandmother. Among the Algonquin tribes, these and other myths were reenacted at ceremonies on the anniversary of each event. In other words, at the appropriate seasons for planting maize, hunting deer, or reaping the harvest. The timing of the ceremonies was calculated by counting moons and days, so that a practical calendar was linked with the religion. The passage of the stars marked the 6 great seasons of the year. The dancing and chanting of the myths at these ceremonies were linked with nature's progress through the seasons of the year. It was a kind of magical drama. The power summoned up and released in the ceremonies helped the people to enjoy the fruits of earth and protected them from the dangerous powers of Manitous. Agriculture was always a holy thing. The little garden plots, sorry, my throat's starting to close up. The little garden plots which went to make up the village farmland were given magical life by young women silently walking around them on a given night in spring, quite naked, and so expressing the fertility of nature which they were summoning to help them. The Indians understood well enough that they depended on the powers of nature for their existence. If there was a poor harvest, a drought, an earthquake, they died. They taught this to the early white settlers, but found that the newcomers rewarded good with evil. Though the tribes detested any central authority, the pressure of the white man who seized their lands drove the chiefs to organize large confederations for resistance. On the eastern seaboard, the struggle ended with the War of 1675 to 1676, when the Algonquins were decisively defeated, massacred, and driven from their heartland. Written by C.A. Burland. Further reading, C.A. Burland, North American Indian Mythology. I do believe I have a copy of that book too. Hamlin, 1967, and H.B. Alexander, North American Mythology, published by Cooper Square, 1964, and F.W. Hodge, edition or edited, something like that, just says ed. Handbook of American Indians North of Mexico, published by Scholarly Press, 1968. And we'll just finish, there's just one small paragraph dedicated to it on this page. Allah, Supreme Being of Islam, the God worshipped by the Arabs from before the time of Muhammad, who proclaimed him as the only God. Pictorial representation of Allah is forbidden, but Arab artists have made graceful play with designs using letters of his name. See Islam. Here is a picture of presumably the name of Allah written in Arabic, I'm presuming, and that's as much as they're allowed to try and represent Allah. It's the same in Judaism. We're forbidden to have pictures of God, which I used to find deeply amusing when I used to go to temple at Beit Knesset, and they had a tapestry of Moses coming down with the tablets with two horns coming out of his head, which I think were meant to represent the beams of light that were flowing from his head because he'd had an encounter with the Holy One, blessed be his name forever and ever. Amen. So, although we're not supposed to have pictures of God, we sometimes get around things. But anyway, tomorrow or the next day or whenever I feel inspired to, we will continue reading about All Hallows Eve, otherwise known as Halloween. But that's for another day, people of Earth, possibly tomorrow. And Goddess, the Divine Feminine, bless us all. Had a lovely time reading to you, and I'm quite tired now and need to watch a bit of TV and then go to bed and rest and nurse my cold. It's not too bad. I only had to blow my nose a few times, so hopefully by tomorrow it'll start dissipating away, sashaying away, as you do, unless it gets worse, and then, yeah, I can be quite ill for quite some time. But I'm not going to think that way. I've had a good day. It's been a lovely day, and I'm grateful to the Manatū and to Creator and the Divine Feminine, the Lord and the Lady, an equal harmonic resonance. That's how it should be with partnerships, should it not? Babies. And on that note, I bid you all adieu. Have a beautiful day, night, evening, morning, wherever you are on planet Earth in the space-time continuum, and all the interdimensional ones, whichever dimension you receive these missives from. And I was before I go, I spoke to my friend Jared, and I was telling him about my Friday night dance and how that young girl, she was in her, I don't know, mid-30s, African woman, planted a big red lipstick kiss on my cheek, and how she had told me that she'd been out with her girlfriends dining in fine restaurants, and that they decided, because life is difficult for women, which by and large it is, that they would celebrate life every day rather than wait for birthdays. And then Jared wisely said to me, "Oh, That was a message for you, Tanya. And I said, yes, I thought so too. And I immediately responded to the young African woman that indeed it was a very lovely idea that life should be celebrated and enjoyed with good, kind people supporting us, and live life every day and in celebration and in rejoicing. And I said, and therefore she rewarded me with the big kiss, which when I went home I was chuckling about it because it was right here. Big smooch. Anyway, what was her name? Jade. Lovely woman. She had beautiful long hair right down to the top of her buttocks. Thick, beautiful, long hair. Very attractive young lady. So yes, but Jared so wisely, that was a message, Tanya. I said, yes, Jared. I reclaimed my power and took myself out dancing and was rewarded with that message, telling me that I did the right thing, celebrating my life as I do, every day as often as I can at least, if I'm not too unwell, because life is short and life is magical and life is blessed and it's meant to be enjoyed with harm to none and competition with none, and with good, kind friends and family, and one day for me even a true love partnership one day. But I don't hold out too much hope for that. I just, pardon me, live my best life. You know, co-create with Creator as I do. So, again I bid you good night and Goddess bless. Bye for now, people of